Welcome back to another episode of the Outsider Sports Baseball Podcast. Corey Jason, Dylan Mel, Ben Mandel, John Pauline. A little somber, a little sad, very sad. Yankees fall to the Dodgers in 5. Took some time to process this. Really need to work on the mentals with that because that was just a brutal game 5.
I swear it was a scheduling thing. That was why there was no episode for anybody wondering. Wasn't because of us being Yankees fans. Wasn't because I picked Yankees in 5 and it was Dodgers in 5. It was all scheduling.
Yeah, I mean, I went to game 4 on Tuesday, so we obviously couldn't do anything that night. Game 5 ran late on Wednesday, Halloween weekend. It was a scheduling thing.
Yeah, and Dylan with football, make sure you guys check out Dylan's content, by the way. Dylan, give yourself a shout.
Dylan Mel NFL.
Yeah, I do want to.
Downside is
Corey, I do want to just say right now, while you may have noticed if you follow the Outsider Sports Football Podcast, we haven't really been putting out episodes right now. That podcast will be up and going again at some point, but for now, for all your NFL content, we're directing you right over to Dylan Mel. He's going to get you covered. He's going to hold down the fort over on his channel.
Great guy, even for an Eagles fan. But this whole World Series thing kind of begs a question. This is the Dodgers' second World Series in the last 4 seasons. Second since 2020. They've been to a handful now in the last few years. Is this the beginnings of a dynasty? What makes a team a dynasty? Do they have the makings? And is their window large enough to get there?
Well, with the amount of division titles that the Dodgers have won in, the past 15 years, it feels like they should already be a dynasty. But, just now at this point, over those 15 division titles, 2 world championships, you can argue that they at this point are at the beginning stages of this dynasty, especially when you look at this year with Ohtani. This was a throwaway year. He's not pitching. This year was, hey, we aren't expecting to get the most out of Shohei Ohtani. And they still went out and won a world championship. So I think that says a lot about this Dodgers team, and it says a lot about what you can expect from them in the future because, guess what? Their pitching depth gets a lot better if Shohei Ohtani is pitching because not only are they adding a pitcher to their staff, but they don't even have to remove anybody from the roster.
Yeah, for sure. Obviously, we'll see what free agency leads, but just the core of Ohtani, Betts, Freeman, Yamamoto, you have all the tools to be there. The only thing that can stop the Dodgers, it feels like, is the Dodgers. But we kind of saw them get over that hump because obviously there was just a little bit of an asterisk with the COVID World Series. I get it. Every sport had their situation, but for the Dodgers, a team who it felt like could never get it done after 162 and in the playoffs, the COVID World Series kind of had a little but to it. Now, when we look back at that in the history books, I almost think we're going to be like, well, they did go get it done in 2024.
Yeah, that's very true because, if they had only won that COVID World Series, you would have just said, oh, it was a fluke. 60-game season, it's very easy to play half a season's worth of baseball. But winning this one, definitely big for the Dodgers in that dynasty, to be able to say, hey, we were able to back it up and win a legit one. It's just now with, the Dodgers, what do they do? Because you obviously look at them and think, okay, pitching needs some improvement on the starter side. They need more out of their starters. Obviously, they had injuries this year. That alone is going to make them feel like an improvement for next season moving forward. Figure guys like Dustin May come back. Who's the young kid who was just terrible at the beginning of the season. I'm drawing a blank on his name. He was good at the beginning of the year. Yeah. It's another one
Tony
where
Gonsolin too.
Yeah, Gonsolin as well. I mean, they have young arms and guys who were just injured, had down years. Add that with Ohtani joining the mix in this starting rotation. I mean, come on. The Dodgers aren't even adding anybody yet through free agency, and they're worlds better.
Yeah, one name I've seen really connected to them would be Roki Sasaki, who has expressed interest in playing with the Dodgers, Ohtani, Yamamoto on the West
I was
Coast.
going to say, why would you not want to go to Ohtani and Yamamoto on the West Coast as close as you can get to home?
And Munetaka Murakami has also expressed the same interest in that. So they're kind of monopolizing the Japanese market, especially these guys that aren't in line for a big deal. They could really benefit from those who are on that international free agent rookie contract. So the Dodgers as a dynasty, Ohtani coming back and able to pitch really benefits them. But how many more do they need to win to actually become one? Because I've always believed that the rule of thumb would be 3 World Series, 3 titles in twice as many years.
See, I feel like it's 3 and 5. 3 and 5 is my dynasty rule, not 3 and 6.
I think for baseball, I agree with Corey, just because it is so much more of a full team dependent sport and anything really can happen. I feel like it's a lot easier in other leagues like the NBA and the NFL because the star players can really affect a game more than they can in the MLB. Now, obviously with Ohtani, you know, he's a star player who can really affect the game because he hits and pitches. But aside from him, you know, Mookie Betts can't control it if Jack Flaherty goes out there and gives up 4 home runs. That has nothing to do with him. So for me, I think I would agree with Corey. If they get 2 more in the next 5 years, they'll be winning the NL West, I'm sure, just about every single year. Maybe San Diego scraps and takes it 1 year, but, you know, they'll have multiple division titles, be in NLCSs. And if they could get 3 and 6 years, to me, I'd be like, that was a baseball dynasty.
It's interesting you say 2 more, though, because is 2020 not a part of what this dynasty could be?
Well, they would
I think
have
the
to
roster's too different.
I mean, you still have Betts. You still have some of the same guys. And obviously no Seager. Kershaw's still there. Gonsolin, who pitched in that
But Kershaw's like not still there. Like he might as well just be a pitching bench coach at this point.
I would just discount what they did in 2020 almost, because I mean, considering that it's basically an asterisk World Series anyway, and the teams.
I don't want to discount it from themselves, but
no,
but if they won,
the dynasty,
if they won 2 more in the next 6 years, I wouldn't be like the Dodgers dynasty from 2020 to 2030. I'd say from 2024 to 2030.
Exactly.
I don't know. I think that you would include it just in the front end.
I think like that's the thing. You look at all the division titles that they've won in the last 15 years.
I don't count division titles at all for that.
But I'm saying this is a team that has been in the NLCS so many times in the last 15 years that it almost does feel like this is when they're finally breaking through.
I think if I was trying to make a case for them to be the best team ever, then I would use the 2020, but otherwise I wouldn't.
Look, the only thing I want to go back to is this 3 and 5, 3 and 6 years kind of thing, because 3 and 5 has been done, and it's been done as recently as the San Francisco Giants in 2010, or was it 2010, 2012, 2014? So it's not like this is something that hasn't been done. It's not like it's something that hasn't been done recently. You know, when you look at it, I think you either go every other year or you should have to win something back-to-back in order to be a dynasty. I mean, you look at what the Yankees were able to do in the 90s. When it's able to stretch across an entire decade like that, that's a dynasty. You know, it's not like you look at the Mets.
Dylan's reminiscing before, like we weren't even born yet.
I watched the Jeter documentary.
Look, but you look at the Mets in '86. Everybody thought they were going to become a dynasty, but they completely fell off. Thanks, cocaine. But you know what? At the end of the day, like they weren't able to put it together and keep it going. I think you need to be able to win those back-to-back championships, be able to consistently get back there. not just do it 2 times, not just do it, every other year. Be able to go back to back and consistently be there. If you do 3 and 6 years, you can still be a dynasty, but you better have gotten to the finals at least a 4th time in that 6-year span.
I do think some of it is circumstantial too, as well, because if they won 3 and 6 years, but one of those years Freeman and Ohtani both got hurt, I think like you could be like, well, that year, who knows what would have happened. But I hear you. I do think that it's fair to have a high standard for dynasty.
But also, too, if you look at the competition, right? I mean, the Houston Astros, one might say, oh, yeah, they were on the brink of a dynasty. Obviously, you don't like to look at them that way just because of the cheating and everything that was going on. But even for them, they had a certain level of dominance that just felt like they were that much better than everybody because of how good the competition was. I mean, the Yankees were lights out in 17.
What's the step below a dynasty? Like, if dynasty is
a good run,
a question mark.
Because I would give the Astros that tier just below a dynasty.
That's what I'm saying.
I would say they had a good run. I'd say they had a good run.
A dynasty with a question mark.
I'd say it's a good run, and it was a great team.
I mean, they went to what, 4 World Series?
Well, and that's the thing. They went. I believe they have that 4 and 6.
I mean, they won in 17. They lost to the Nationals in 19. They lost to the Braves in 21, I believe.
Yeah,
and then won in 22.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say that they were a great team.
They had a great run.
But they have an asterisk for a different reason, though.
True.
See, but they have the cheating associated with the first title, and they only won 2. That's the thing. Like, they only won 2, and they got there, 4 times, but it's just not the same. Like, they only won 2 championships. It's a dynasty with a question mark. There's so many what ifs that go along with the Houston Astros.
What if they didn't cheat? What if they didn't cheat? They'd have 1 less. Or they
would
never even
and that's the thing. And what if they didn't cheat? They might have had more. What if they were able to keep that entire group together? What if AJ Hinch was still their manager?
Yeah, there's a lot.
You know what AJ Hinch did with the Tigers roster? That's not nearly as talented as what he had in Houston.
But let's kind of look at this from the flip side. The Dodgers, who 1 and 5, did have to beat somebody. They beat the best question mark team coming out of the American League. Were the Yankees really the second best team to come out? Because the Yankees want to establish their own dynasty. They want to get back to that great run they had. They thought, bringing in Soto would get them there. They ran into a National League buzzsaw. We saw the comments that Joe Kelly made saying that the Yankees were like the 8th or 9th best team in the postseason. Are they really that bad? I mean, how many teams do we think are actually better than them? Were they the best to come out of the American League?
Yeah, I think Joe Kelly's comments of 8 or 9 is a little ridiculous. That is just a stretch for my liking. I do think that the Yankees were the best team in the AL. We saw a full 162 game sample size. They were the number 1 seed. We saw an AL playoff bracket. They beat whoever was in front of them. They had arguably 2 of the 3 best players in the American League all year. Aaron Judge is going to win the MVP. And I think Tariq Skubal's great, but there's not a pitcher that I'd want starting in a big game rather than Garrett Cole. In the playoffs, they had the second best bullpen, getting really quality stuff from Weaver, Tim Hill, Canely, etc. You had Glaber, who was batting near 300 from the leadoff spot. Stanton obviously had a wonderful October. Like, I think it's clear to me that they were the best team in the AL. That's why they had the 1 seed, and that's why they came out. Now, when it comes to in the whole league, I think obviously the Dodgers are ahead of them. I would put the Padres. And I'm ready for an argument, though, with anybody else, because I think the Mets and Phillies, like the Yankees, had holes on their roster.
No, I think that, Dylan, you're 100% correct that they were the best team in the American League. And this is something that a lot of people were just pointing out in general And at the time, it wasn't necessarily a critique on the Yankees' talent level, because in Judge and Soto that they have the power there. Throw Stanton in the mix in October, and it's a difficult lineup to have to get through, especially the way Boone was staggering them. But at the same time, I think that when you look at just in terms of how hot certain teams were, the Padres and Mets weren't as good as they finished. They just got hot at the right time. I think that ultimately the Phillies, they got cold in the second half of the season, but the Phillies, the Dodgers, those are two teams you can clearly say were better than the Yankees, just roster-wise, because, the Phillies would have ended up having the starting pitching edge when you look at complete depth of rotations. I think that the Phillies' back end of the rotation matched up very well. And look, Zach Wheeler, Garrett Cole is a toss-up. The Phillies lineup completely deeper. I think when you look at the top of it, and you look at the stars that the Phillies have, Bryce Harper, he's going to go toe-to-toe with anybody. So, yeah, I'll argue the Phillies all day with you there, Dylan. But the Mets and Padres, on the other hand, those are just two teams that got hot the second half of the season, the last 2 months especially. They played red hot. They were on fire. Now, Joe Kelly, he's definitely just stirring the pot. It's easy to talk after you win. But to say that Atlanta got screwed over by a doubleheader is absolutely insane when you look at the way the Mets had to travel that week. So give me a break.
Yeah, what's that Michael Jordan quote? Anybody could talk when they're up, or a real man talks when it's 0-0.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's also how many innings Joe Kelly threw in the postseason.
Well, exactly. And he ends up missing with the shoulder, and he's like, oh, yeah, we knew we were that much better than them. We knew we just didn't have to screw up. And you know what? At the end of the day, just because we didn't really get to talk about this series too much, he's not wrong in the sense that there was not really a moment after game 2 where it felt like the Yankees were in control of a game. Even in game 4, with the Dodgers almost sort of punting with who they were throwing in that game and having Brett Honeywell throw as much as he did, for the Yankees to only pull away in the 9th inning, it just felt like, the other shoe was going to fall.
Come on, give us a little more credit than that.
8th inning. Bottom of the 8th, my bad. But still, it just felt like the other shoe was going to drop the whole time, even when they went up early against the Dodgers. When you get the chance, you have to put them away, and that's one thing that the Padres were able to do. It's one thing the Mets were able to do. The Yankees just weren't able to find it.
I mean, the Mets and Padres were not able to do it.
They did it one more time than the Yankees did, each of them.
That is true, but they didn't successfully do it for the whole time. The Yankees...
No, but there was in both of those series, in the Padres and Mets series, there were more instances where it felt like those two teams had a shot of winning.
Right, but again, it doesn't matter. None of the three teams we're talking about did win.
No,
so
but
saying who lost better doesn't really make any sense. It doesn't matter.
I'm not trying to say so and so lost better. I'm just trying to say that, the Yankees were punchless. So yes, I would say that the Mets and Padres were better teams at that moment.
Well, yeah, I'm not going to argue that they were better teams. They are better teams, but
and that's what I'm trying to say. I don't think that overall the Mets were a better team than the New York Yankees this season. The Mets just got hot late, so at the end of the season, they felt like a better team.
Oh no, I think overall they just were a better team this season.
I don't think on a full 162 they were better. I don't think they had the starting pitching to compete over 162.
Correct.
I mean, we saw them play each other 4 times, and the Mets handily won 4 times.
I mean, if you just go by season series, the Phillies are better than the Dodgers.
The Yankees are better than the Phillies.
The Mets also played. The Mets played the Yankees when the Yankees were literally at their lowest. They didn't have Jazz Chisholm on the roster. Pretty sure Anthony Rizzo was hurt, so it was a rotation between Rice and J.D. Davis at first base. I mean,
Omar Narvaez played a little catcher.
Omar Narvaez was a Met at the beginning of the season. That was the Torrens swap, right?
Yes, you're welcome for that. Torrens was good for you guys.
Narvaez was supposed to be good. Just got too banged up early on with that contract.
Yeah, but in turn, Joe Kelly clearly hating.
But the Yankees, it's just frustrating because we saw that period they went through from June through pretty much August. And the only reason that it's not talked about more is because the Phillies, the Dodgers, the Orioles, all these really good teams went through just as bad of a pitfall over the summer months. It was kind of crazy that pretty much every team in baseball somehow seemed to play under 500. And that allowed teams like the Padres and the Mets, even the Red Sox to an extent, to kind of claw their way back in. The Tigers, especially. Teams that were down and
Red
out
Sox hang
early.
around as long as they did. The Red Sox had no business being in the chase as long as they were.
Exactly. So, like, the fact that all these good teams decided to take the summer off.
Well, yeah, come the All-Star break, I think they were saying it was like going to be a record number of teams on pace for 100 wins. All the Phillies fans were talking about was how they were on pace for 108 wins.
And then no team got to 100 wins.
Exactly. Yeah. It actually is insane.
Why do we think that is, though? What do we think caused this just steep fall off for every team that we just don't normally see every year?
Injuries,
I think just the dog days.
Yeah, dog days, injuries, and then you just also have, certain teams, when you start off that hot, everything always evens out. This is something I always say. Things are never as good as they seem, and they're never as bad as they seem. It's just all of these teams happen to have their bad stretch at the same time in a mix with desperation of teams like San Diego and the New York Mets.
I'll say this too. The new schedule where everybody plays everybody played a pretty big factor in that as well, because now you're talking about real parity in a schedule. The Dodgers can't just get healthy off of the NL West being bad. I mean, one, the NL West isn't as bad as it once was, but two, the Dodgers can't just get healthy off of that and end up as a 100+ win team every season. Now it's going to be a lot more competitive between all these teams.
I don't think a lot of people talk about that schedule as much as they should. Like, everyone was so focused on the pitch clock and everything that the schedule change kind of flew under the radar there, and I think that's had like maybe more of effect on the game in the season than the pitch clock has.
Yeah, and that was one of the few changes I supported, because that's a great way to help market your stars, get your stars to play in just about every market every year.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you want to market Judge and Ohtani, young guys like Paul Skeens, have them playing in every market. Have everybody's eyes on them at least once a year for a series. Not, every couple years if, they're in one league and they travel to the other every, 3 years. That's a good thing. That's one I applaud, and hopefully the blackouts end. We'll talk a bit more over the offseason about the whole Bally Sports thing, I think. We'll kind of see how that's going to go, because Major League Baseball wants to kind of take over all the regional networks. And some of the bigger market teams, at least in our area, we have SNY and Yes, who won't want to give up that power and control. But people who live far away from the Yankees but are still considered in market. I don't know if blackouts are a big deal for you guys out there, Dylan, with the Yankees.
I pay for the Yes Network, so
you skirt it that way?
I don't know if I'd call it skirting it. I pay like $20-something a month to have all the Yankees games on my computer through the Yes Network. But if the game's on like Apple TV or ESPN, like, I don't get to watch it on Yes. The Apple TV one's the one that annoys me, because I'm not paying for Apple TV for 2 games.
Well, Dylan, what was that the Mets game against Atlanta?
I don't know what happened there.
You got hit with a local blackout on ESPN that they realized should have been blacked out on the whole time instead of.
I got hit with a local blackout in the bottom of the 8th inning, which was ridiculous. I was able to watch the whole game up until when I needed to see it, and then ESPN, it was blacked out, but it wasn't on SNY, so I just couldn't watch it at all.
So they gotta figure out a way to avoid that stuff. But we'll see how the Yankees and the Dodgers improve or get worse over the offseason. Some numerous guys out there that can either help them. They need to retain some of their stars. We saw the Dodgers talking about how they're eyeing Soto. They want to give him, maybe they'll defer $900 million for him. Pay him
Enough.
$1 million a year.
That organization is going to be unsellable if they do that. Either that or they're just giving the organization away.
But let's kind of talk about some of these free agents and the teams that, and the players that got qualifying offers. The qualifying offer this year was $21.05 million. And the players that got them were Juan Soto, Corbin Burns, Pete Alonso, Alec Bregman, Max Fried, Willie Adames, Anthony Santander, Teoscar Hernandez, Nick Pivetta, Christian Walker, Sean Manaea, Luis Severino, and Nick Martinez. Ben, as a Met fan, you extended it to Manaea and Severino and Alonso. Obviously, Alonso makes perfect sense.
Mm-hmm.
But Manaea and Severino were two guys you threw a 1-year flyer on.
Correct.
Is one you'd rather keep than the other? Do you think they both deserve that qualifying offer? What do you make of that? Because that's a lot more money per season, I guess, on an AAV than both of these pitchers would be worth on a total market deal.
Yeah, and I think, to be honest with you, this completely goes to a combination of David Stearns and Steve Cohen merging into a perfect baseball cohesive operation. Because you have Stearns who's going to operate smart. Stearns who doesn't give any kind of big contract or term contract to pitchers over the age of 30. Stearns is someone who is going to be okay overpaying for starting pitching if it's going to be on a 1-year deal. So for guys like Severino and Manaea, yeah, it's going to be a fairly significant overpay in terms of short term, just for the year. But for the Mets, they would love it because Steve Cohen and his pocketbooks, you definitely can eat that extra money right now. You just don't want to eat the term.
So do you expect either of them to accept it?
I expect Severino to be honest with you. I don't
Why
think
is that?
Manaea will. I think Severino's one who I honestly think he just enjoys being in New York. I think he's happy that he was able to stay in New York. And to be quite honest with you, I think he realizes that, he might not have had the best season that he could have had. I think he still feels like he was working towards his best self towards the end of the season. And he knows if he could stay healthy for another year, he might be able to get the biggest contract he possibly could. Now, for Sean Manaea, as a lefty who, reworked his delivery to be just like Chris Sale, and you saw how effective Chris Sale was, that seems like a consistent way to, keep yourself good. It doesn't make any sense for Manaea to accept it because he's definitely going to get that long-term deal. I think Severino is one who, may not be able to get it with a competitive team that he wants.
I don't know. I feel like this is Severino's last chance at a big deal, at a larger deal. Another year older. We know he's had injury issues in the past.
I think that's his
I don't
biggest.
see why he would want to gamble on another 1-year deal where he might not get the AAV, but 4 years 40 for him.
Mhm. No, I completely
better
agree
than
with
1
you,
year
Corey.
for 20.
No,
and then have to try it again next year hurt.
Look, I agree with you, especially because if you are Severino, it is one of those things that, you're going to want to try to test the market when you've had your one healthy season. The biggest issue is going to be for him finding a team that's going to be willing to part with the draft capital. Because if he goes to, let's say, a team like the Dodgers, their highest draft pick is going to be outside the top 10. They're losing their first round pick. They may not care, but, obviously the Dodgers aren't going to be a team looking to sign him. Other teams might care. They're going to really care about losing that draft capital to the Mets. And in reality, that's the real reason why the Mets go and extend these qualifying offers to guys like Severino and Manaea. They may not be worth the AAV, but they're hoping to get the draft pick. But but a guy like Manaea or Severino doesn't want to end up stuck on the shelf until after the draft.
Well, I mean, it's weird because
it happened to Gio Gonzalez. It happened to Dallas Keuchel. It's been a big issue, especially for pitchers.
But also, if the Mets are looking to go big game hunting, then it kind of washes out the draft capital that they would get for, somebody signing away Severino.
Well,
'Cause
yeah,
it's not-
but at the same time, it washes away. But at the same time, it doesn't, if that makes sense, because you still
Yeah.
have what you were going to have. Like you're piling up draft capital to then get eaten by the luxury tax penalties you're going to have to pay.
And it's not like you're stealing another team's first round pick. You're getting a comp pick at the end of the first round.
No, but that team still loses their first pick, though.
Yeah. I think something also to
Anybody
factor.
outside the top 10, if you're in the top 10 and sign a qualified player, then you lose your second highest pick.
Yeah, I think something also to factor in with Severino is he clearly likes the New York area.
Yeah.
So, the Yankees, as far as I know, have zero interest in bringing him back. Does he want to upend his whole life at this point in his career? Probably not. For $20 million to stay with the Mets on another prove-it deal where he could probably get another contract if he does good again.
And a team that is competing. The team that plans to compete. I think that's the biggest thing. You want to try to compete and win. You had fun. You saw the vibes that this side of New York brings. It is a different kind of fun. I'm not going to say it's more fun, but it's a different kind of fun that the Mets have.
Out of the 131 players prior to this year to ever receive a qualifying offer, how many do we think have accepted the qualifying offer?
The only one off the top of my head is Josh Reddick.
If we had to take a guess, 131 players have ever received the qualifying offer.
12.
Yeah, Josh
John?
Reddick is the only one off the top of my head in Houston.
So are you saying one, Ben?
Yeah, that's the only one I can remember. So,
John?
I'd say like 5.
13.
Okay.
Price is right rules, baby. Price is right
Do you have
rules.
the list? Do you have the list there?
I don't have the list on, but 13 of 131.
No, it's not a lot. And because it's the average of the top 125 paid players' salaries for that year.
Which is why it goes up every year,
so
especially.
Ohtani's not helping that this year because of his $2 million salary with the
No. That's not how that's not taken into account. It's the cap
AAV
hit.
of your contract.
Well, so Ohtani's cap hit isn't $2 million.
Well, there's no cap.
Right, but his luxury is like his hit to the luxury tax isn't $2.5 million. It's still $45 million.
That makes zero sense.
He's getting paid $2.5, but they can't skirt. We talked about it. The way we talked about it last year was they can't skirt paying lower now and spreading it out for the luxury tax. That's not what the luxury tax was made for.
Well, I mean, that at least makes sense because, look, if the Dodgers did that, they would just be absolutely screwed for the future. But
right, well, also all these smaller
way,
market teams that the tax goes towards would have had that contract vetoed in a second because it basically defeats the whole purpose of revenue sharing.
Well, all right. So Ohtani does go towards it. Anyway, it's the 125 highest paid players. You average that out. That's where you get the 20 million. Most of these guys are not in the top 125 in the league with how many players are in baseball. That's why, you only saw 13 people qualified. And the Mets, I think, are the only ones who qualified multiple because most teams don't want to pay multiple people $20 million.
Interesting you say that because the Yankees had 2 players that would have been eligible and 2 players who I would have thought would have received the offer. Juan Soto being one, the other being Gleyber Torres, who I would have thought was a shoo-in for a qualifying offer because I don't think he would have accepted it, and I think that he probably would have gotten a decent-sized deal, but they didn't give it to him. And I don't know about you guys, but to me, that shows a lot to, one, what the Yankees think his market is, and 2, what they think they can get him for. Because if they think he would accept a 1-year, $21 million deal, he almost assuredly is going to get paid a lot less over a longer-term deal than $20 million, which I thought that was probably where he would have started at. 5 years, $20 million a year, 6 years for 20. But now we're talking he's in that 17 million range, 15 million even.
I'm not sure with Gleyber, but the fact that the Yankees didn't give him the qualifying offer
It's curious.
Almost, it leads me to believe he's going to be back.
I'm leaning towards agreeing with you, especially because him and Soto have grown really close this year. And I think that might play a role in bringing Glaber back. I don't think Soto takes less money, but I think Glaber would.
Yeah.
I think Glaber might just take less money because he wants to stay where he is.
Yeah.
I think
Glaber
the fact that
loves being a Yankee.
Well, the fact that, he came out, he was like, look, moving me to third base, I don't like it. There was zero pushback from the Yankees on that. And I think, he appreciates that. He appreciates the way that, the organization really has stuck with him. There have been a lot of calls to move on from him over the past couple of years. So I think he really respects that. And I think he just understands that he is always going to be competing, and he doesn't need to necessarily chase the biggest paycheck where, he might just be happier winning and, taking a bit of a hometown discount.
I'm going to throw out a number there, and you guys tell me if the Yankees would be smart to sign Glaber for this. The DJ LeMahieu contract, 6 years, $90 million, $15 million a year.
How old's Glaber? I don't know off the top of my head. What's he, like 26, 27?
I think he's 27. We'll
So-
double check that. Glaber Torres is 27.
Yeah, I mean, he's got a decent enough bat with some pop in it, too. It's not that second's the toughest fielding position, but Glaber's not great to begin with. So if he ever had to DH.
Right. So
I
a
was going to say,
6-year deal would
eventually
take
he
him.
can become a DH.
Yeah, and
Right.
like I said, his bat's good enough. I think it's a worth deal.
Moving to
Especially, I think it's also worth it, especially if it incentivizes Juan Soto to come back to the team.
Yes.
And, at the end of the day, if this is, per se, Juan Soto's Gleyber Torres, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Thanasis Antetokounmpo, then sure, give him whatever you need.
Look, I think that, let's be real here. I'll let you guys talk whatever you want to talk into, try whatever's going to make Juan Soto stay. But there's only one thing that Juan Soto's following right now, and it's the dollar signs. Otherwise, he would have already been locked up by the Yankees at this point.
No,
He
it's
also
not true.
does
He's
want to.
always-
He also does want to compete. So
Yeah, well, he wants
Not
to
every
compete.
team can offer him.
Well, but the only teams that are going to be able to offer him are teams that are looking to compete year in and year out.
Just
They're
because you're
big
looking to
spending.
compete doesn't mean you will compete.
I
No,
think
and I'm not going to sit here and say Steve Cohen has the most money. That's where Juan Soto is going to go. Yeah, they're going to compete every year because of Steve Cohen's money, as shown a couple of years ago. Just because he goes out and spends doesn't mean they're going to be a great baseball team. But at the same time, I think that, if you want to talk about competing, then the Dodgers are going to be the team that offers him the most.
Of course. Well, we'll talk about that too, because I kind of want to go through the top 10 free agents. I'll name the player, their position, their age, because age right now is an important factor in what these contracts these guys will get. Give me an idea of, where your initial gut reaction to where you think this player fits in well. Not necessarily if you think they'll go there, but where you think they'll fit in. And let's start off with Tanner Scott, the reliever, 30 years old, was traded from the Marlins to the Padres. The Padres gave up a boatload for him. Really set the tone for that reliever market. Tanner Scott, one, I would love to see as a Yankee. I think he would fit in really well, would be a great foil to Luke Weaver in the later innings. And I think that's also a pretty realistic signing option.
the Padres obviously giving up all that for him want to keep him, so I think that's the obvious choice. My sleeper choice would be music to John's ears, the Phillies. What does this team need? Bullpen. Where should they invest? Bullpen. We're going to hear about them in the Juan Soto race, of course, and every team that has a pulse of competing for a World Series should be in the Juan Soto race. But when it comes to what the Phillies' actual priority should be this offseason, if Soto's off the table, it should be the bullpen. And Tanner Scott's a guy that could be a closer for you in a big World Series game.
Yeah, for me, it's, Tanner Scott. He's going to end up going to a team that I think is going to be very noisy this offseason. And this is going to be not music to your guys' ears, Dylan and Corey, but it's the Boston Red Sox. I think Boston's going to be very loud this offseason. They signed Cora to the extension. I don't think Cora would have wanted to stay if they weren't going to go out and spend. And I think Tanner Scott is a start for them because that bullpen was atrocious for the Red Sox last year.
Next guy up, Jack Flaherty, starter, 29 years old. I think there's a number of teams he can go to. I think Baltimore is somebody that could really use him again.
I think he's staying in LA. Dodger fan growing up, just won a World Series with them. They have the money. I don't see him leaving at all. I think it's like about a 1% shot.
I think he goes back to Detroit.
I think he stays with the Dodgers.
Next up, the 29-year-old shortstop, Willie Adames. I think he's a Dodger. I think he fits in perfect with that roster.
I sneaky think the Mariners are an option here. I think this is the kind of guy that they go after. They're not big money spenders typically, but I think Adames is a guy who could fit in the middle of their lineup, either near the top or kind of in the middle there around Julio Rodriguez. But I think the Mariners are a sneaky team because I also think they could potentially look around at the AL West and be like, the Rangers took a big step back. Question marks with the Astros as they started off slow this past year and they have some free agents. This might be where they feel like it's their spot to capitalize, and Adames is a guy you could add to that roster to potentially bolster yourself as the best team in the division.
Yeah, for Willie Adames, I actually think this is where San Francisco is going to swing big. I think they see an opportunity here to finally land a big free agent, and they're going to overpay. I think San Francisco is going to be the ones that, really go in on Adames because they're just not going to be in on the Juan Soto deal. They're not going to be able to match what the Dodgers, the Yankees, Mets, and I think the Red Sox are going to try, but I also don't think they're going to be able to for Soto. So I think Adames to the Giants.
I'm going to say the Braves. I just feel like the Braves, they're going to be coming back and have a lot of guys off injuries and, kind of going to want to make a little splash here.
Yeah, and even though Dansby Swanson isn't, the world beater that he was in Atlanta, or it felt like, I think Atlanta is missing Dansby Swanson to an extent. I know Arcia has been solid for them, but I did think about Adames to Atlanta as well, John.
Yeah.
Next up, Pete Alonso, 30-year-old first baseman. I think he goes back to the Mets, and they end up retiring number 20 for the greatest offensive player in Mets history.
I think he returns to the Mets, but I think a sneaky sleeper team could be the Houston Astros. The weakest position on the team by far was first base last year. Alonso has a ton of pop. I think he could really benefit from those Crawford boxes. And again, I feel like they could see potentially a team like the Mariners making a move and be like, is the AL West slipping away from us? Let's go make a pop. Let's show that we're still here to play.
Yeah, for Pete Alonso, I do think he comes back to the Mets, and I think that's ultimately going to be because the Mets are going to offer him the most money. I think that Pete Alonso's value is highest to the New York Mets.
How much money do you think that is?
I think the Mets are going to give him close to $200 million. And when you look at what Freddie Freeman just did, how can you look at Pete Alonso and say that he is worth more than Freddie Freeman? I believe Freddie's contract was 6 for $170 in that range. So look, Alonso, I think he's going to end up he should be in that 6 for $160, between 160 and 180. But I think the Mets are going to overpay him. I think they're going to, have a little bit of emotion. David Stearns was talking about this, immediately after the season ended. And he said, look, I can't, I don't talk any finances with Pete. That's all with his agent. But the Mets are in a bit of a not tough, but different situation with this because most teams, they can separate and they can just make business decisions. But the Mets decision makers, Steve Cohen and David Stearns, are both lifelong diehard Mets fans. And the Mets had moments this season that, they haven't experienced in the entire time the franchise has been around. And they didn't even win a world championship. And I think that is what is going to be the ultimate decider and really more emotion in this decision than any other baseball decision Stearns has ever made.
Next up, we got Anthony Santander, 30-year-old outfielder. I think he returns to Baltimore. I think we start to see Baltimore keep their own guys.
I would bet on that, but I think a sneaky other spot for him is the Dodgers. I think it's possible Teoscar Hernandez gets a bag somewhere, ends up leaving the Dodgers, and they replace him with Santander somehow.
Yeah, see, I actually think Santander is going to end up in New York. Whoever doesn't get Soto. I think that's ultimately what it's going to be for Santander. I think Santander is going to be the consolation prize for Juan Soto.
I like Santander, but I don't know. To me, he looks like he's somebody whose big contract's just going to end so horribly.
No, I am not, trying to get too much into it. I think he's someone who's going to give you a couple more years, but he's not someone who I think is going to give you the term that he's going to get in a contract. But at the same time, you're going to throw all your eggs in Soto. If Soto doesn't sign right away, which why would he? Santander, he's going to be able to leverage the other team into, giving him a bit more. And that's going to be in terms of years than you probably would have liked.
Next up, we got Max Fried. He's a 31-year-old starter. Honestly, I can see him going to the Red Sox.
I had the exact same team, Boston. I think this is the splash that they make in the pitching market.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Boston is definitely a team that's going to go after Fried, but I think another one is going to be San Francisco, and I think they're going to try to grab Fried because they're not going to be able to bring back Blake Snell.
And honestly, I wouldn't surprise me if the Orioles go after him either. So I feel like the Orioles need pitching, and they have the money to spend. Like if they decide they want to spend money.
Well, yeah, and the new ownership group has said that they're going to spend.
So
next up, we got Alex Bregman. He's a 31-year-old third baseman. It seemed like that he was going to be done with the Astros. It seemed like they were done with him. It seemed like they were going to be parting ways. I can see him going to the Blue Jays. Pair him with old friend George Springer.
I think after this World Series and the infield defense being such a problem, the Yankees should certainly give Bregman a look. But ultimately, I have him going to the Royals. I think a left infield of him and Witt Jr. is really nice. He can put the ball in play. He's kind of exactly what the Royals, team is already about: defense and putting the ball in play.
Yeah, I think, the Royals is definitely a great call. I think, the Red Sox, again, this is another one that is definitely going to take a look into Bregman just because. But I think the biggest sleeper for Alex Bregman, and this is if, the Mets miss out on Juan Soto, it is the New York Mets. I know, or not Juan Soto, rather, Pete Alonso. If Pete Alonso ends up walking, Alex Bregman is who the Mets turn to. If he is still unsigned, you
Move
bring him
Vientos
in
to
at third
first.
base and Vientos to first base, which is where Vientos actually played a majority of his minor league career because Brett Beatty.
Another team I want to throw out there, though, for Bregman is the Phillies, especially with the recent reports that they're looking to move Bohm and Castellanos.
What a move from the Phillies, looking to move Bohm. They finally caught on.
Dylan. You know who needs a third baseman?
Nope, I
Bohm
don't.
from the Yankees.
Bohm, Marsh, and
no.
Castellanos all being moved really leads me to believe that they want to try to make a push for Soto.
If Alec Bohm got moved to the Yankees, I'd have to really.
You'd become a Phillies fan.
No. I don't know. I'd be so disappointed in the team.
You would treat a player on your team like I would treat Saquon. Next up, we got Blake Snell. He's 32, starting pitcher. He's a tough one. I really don't know where he goes. I think San Fran just feels like home for him now.
Yeah, Scott Boras client. Scott Boras last offseason, if you remember, he kind of got the back end of the stick when it came to money. MLB teams kind of didn't let him push them around.
Mm-hmm.
Could see Boris seeking some revenge, and that would result in his clients looking for money. I think Blake Snell would stay with the Giants because I think that they're going to pay him a lot. But I think this might be one of those another highest bidder situation. And listen, if the Red Sox want to go all in, I mean, you could go get Blake Snell and just skip over the Max Fried portion. Blake Snell also potentially to the Orioles if Burns moves on.
Yeah, I think that if Blake Snell was going to stay with the Giants, he wouldn't have declined his option. I believe it was over $30 million. It was a pretty high number. So I do think that Blake Snell has now done this a couple years in a row, it feels like, where, he's going into free agency and hasn't really gotten that long-term deal. We saw Montgomery move off of Boris after, what he called an absolute miserable, botched offseason and free agency opportunity for him. So I'm really curious to see how this goes for Blake Snell, because it doesn't feel like he's had a lot of great experiences in free agency in the past. It doesn't feel like he's really been able to, command money anywhere he goes. He's had to find teams that are willing to give it. Whereas, if you're going to opt out of a contract like he did, and the amount of money that he's giving up, typically, you have suitors lining up to pay you the big bucks. So I'm curious. I'm not too sure. I think that, Baltimore, Boston, and Toronto are the ones to look out for on Snell. Mostly because I think all these teams are going to look to compete with the Yankees. And if you want to compete with the Yankees, left-handed starting pitching is always a good start.
I just feel like the Orioles are probably in contention with all these like top pitchers on free agency this year. Like, I mean, like, especially if like Burns doesn't come back, you'd think they're at least going to try and go after Snell or Fried. So it's like just a matter of fact of like who they get. But I think like they're in the running for all three of these guys.
Next up is Corbin Burns. He's 30 years old, starting pitcher. I'm going to say he doesn't go back to Baltimore. And two teams that I think would be sneaky fun for him would be the Tigers and Royals, because it gives him a really solid chance to make the playoffs and compete. Easier division, and two teams that can really pay him for his services.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the Astros for Burns. I think he fits their timeline. 30 years old. I don't think they mind paying a veteran. And I almost think the Astros this offseason might, after the spark that they had to end last year and then the disappointing playoff performance, might give it another run of things rather than blow it up. And they bring in Corbin Burns.
Yeah, see, I am going to go with the team that we haven't talked a lot about, but they are going to be active, and they're probably going to be active in trying to acquire a good amount of the names we've talked about, and that's the Chicago Cubs. I think that Corbin Burns would be a great fit there. He's a guy who's very familiar with the NL Central Division, and he's reunited with Craig Counsell.
And lastly, we have Juan Soto, outfielder, 26 years old. It's a lot younger than a lot of the names we've been saying, 29, 30, 31, 4 or 5 years younger. That's a massive difference. To me, it's been a two-team race. It's going to be a two-team race. It always has been a two-team race between the Yankees and Mets. I think the Mets can probably pay him more money. I think the Yankees have their limit, but I think the Yankees give him a better chance to win than the Mets do, just by nature of the National League being way too stacked and the American League being a little easier to win with. But I think it's going to go down to Yankees and Mets and which borough he likes better.
Yeah, I've talked to you about this, Corey, off of camera. Juan Soto this year became my favorite player in baseball, and if he left, it would be beyond devastating for me. I feel like this is a contract that sometimes the Yankees will say we're the Yankees and we have our limit, we have our max. I think we saw that with Yamamoto, and it is what it is. I think for Juan Soto, it's break out the checkbook and figure out the rest later. And that's kind of how I'd be operating. You said it's a 2-team race. There's going to be a surprise team. There's always a surprise team in the mix.
That's Heyman talking.
Whether Scott Boras is just using them to run up the price between both New York teams or whether they're actually in, I think the Texas Rangers are a sneaky team to watch with the state income tax in Texas. Juan Soto gets to see more of that money. Scott Boras gets to see more of that money. This is a team that just won the World Series 2 years ago. For what it's worth, they have Jacob deGrom coming back. You still have Adolis Garcia, Seager, Simeon. If you add Soto to that mix, it might be the most dangerous lineup in baseball.
And let's get something out there
If you
right
want to
now.
use the state income tax argument, then Tampa Bay is right in the mix.
Tampa Bay
Something out there right now, though.
Tampa
Soto's
Bay
not
would have to
taking any
sell the
deferrals.
stadium. They'd be playing at a little league field to pay him.
There's going to be no deferments in Soto's deal, so let's get that out of there now. Get that out of your mind. He's not taking that Ohtani, 30 years down the line, get paid. He's not going to take that $2.5 million paycheck now. It's going to be a big deal, and it's going to be pretty much all up front.
Yeah, look, I think for Juan Soto, my opinion is, right on par with you, Corey. It's going to be between the Mets and Yankees. I do agree that other teams are going to be involved. I just don't think they're going to be willing. I think, even for the Dodgers, you just won. You are already getting additions with guys coming back from injury. You're not going to be as willing to dish out another mega contract like this. Now, if Juan Soto goes to the Mets, if you're the Dodgers, are you really worried about the Mets if Juan Soto goes there? No. You still feel good about what you're doing. So I don't think the Dodgers are someone who's going to break their backs to make that happen. I think that the Mets and Steve Cohen felt like, they wanted to go out and get those big money contracts early on with Carlos Correa and Max Scherzer and Justin Verlander. But this is the one. Ever since the Nationals sent Juan Soto out, it traded him, and he wasn't going to sign the extensions early with Washington. Talks with Met fans have already been started. Juan Soto apparently wants to go to the Mets. He's apparently close with Starling Marte, believe it or not, and Marte has been recruiting him for the last 2 years. So I think that plays a bit of a role as well. I think Soto does want to go to Queens in a bit of a way.
Did Ben just admit to collusion where the Mets should be, not allowed to sign him now?
It's before he was even a Yankee, Corey. Calm down.
Now he's on another team. You're not allowed to recruit a player from another team.
Look, calm down. Anyway, I think that Steve Cohen ultimately, if Juan Soto is going to follow the dollar signs, I think he's going to feel like the Mets are competitive enough consistently with the money Steve Cohen's willing to spend. And I think it may not even be a matter of if the Yankees can match. It may just be a matter of principle if they will match with how high the number.
And that's exactly what I was saying there. The Yankees are such the type. Cashman is such the type to say, we gave him our best offer, and it's millions less than what the Mets offered him. And I get it. You don't have the money. BS. You'll figure it out down the line. Backload the contract and figure it out later. Money's going to go. Yeah, the Yankee hat is the most popular selling sports hat in the world. You play in a sport with no, salary cap. Garrett Cole's contract is up in 4 years. You could figure. This is the give him what he wants and figure out the roster later. You have Dominguez, you have Wells, you have Volpe, you have Oswaldo Cabrera. You have so much young talent on the team that if you have to play these guys in big spots because you paid Soto, I could live with it as a Yankee fan. We didn't go out and get so-and-so because of Soto deal. Fine, but you just can't leave one of the best hitters in baseball ever on the board because you were too cheap. If he wants to go to the Mets and he picks the Mets over us, I could live with it. I could sleep at night. But if I have to hear I wanted to stay with the Yankees, but the Mets just outbid them by so much. I'm going to lose my mind.
But then again, if the Yankees offered him $700 million and then the Mets decided to pay him $900, I don't know if
Okay, well, sure.
That's
Sure,
ridiculous.
if we break Otani's contract, then I guess like maybe I could believe that the Yankees are
Well,
like,
that's
hey,
why I wonder
we don't have the money.
I wonder if it's not like I don't think it will be about the money with the Yankees. I think it, and I honestly I wouldn't be able to tell you if it's a matter of principle as well with this because I don't see the Yankees doing this either. But it could be a point where the Yankees are just like, we're not giving a player more than this. This is what we gave Aaron Judge. We're not giving someone more than X amount. Because obviously Soto's younger than Judge. So I understand those contracts are not on the same level. But, like, what if the Yankees are just like, look, we're not going over $500 million?
Do you think there's an inverse to that, though, of where the Yankees were not losing a player to the Mets?
Yes. I think
I
that's
think
really
there's
what
the
it's going to
inverse
be.
of that, but I also think at the same time, they're not going to be as worried about that because you can't be insecure with money when it comes to Steve Cohen. Like, you just have to accept the fact that he has more than you.
I think
Like, let's be honest here. If you go into
No.
that route, then you're going to
No, I don't. No, I don't. The
I think
Dodgers
the
didn't.
Yankees stand
We
more to
don't.
lose by letting Soto walk than anything else because one, they'll lose so much revenue. The fans will revolt against them. This isn't losing, some minor. This is losing a
Well,
26-year-old superstar.
It depends what they do with the money, to be fair.
It's a weak free agent class overall. There's no Jacoby Ellsbury to pivot to. Last time they lost,
There is.
That was
But
when
like
they missed on
Ben
Cano, right?
said though, like if the Yankees lost out on Soto, but then they finished this offseason with Santander, Bregman, and Christian Walker, like the fans will be there opening day.
I was going to say,
Brian
you don't even need
McCann,
Bregman
Carlos
at that point. If you
Beltran.
bring in Santander as well as Christian Walker, I think your team definitely got deeper.
Yeah,
But
I'm just
they
my
get
point
better.
being like if the Yankees lose out on Soto for whatever the reason is, it's not like this team is so terrible they can't be anything. Like he's great and he's generational and they should pay him, but the team is deeper than one player.
But like it also stops right there. He's great and he's generational. He's a generational.
I went on the tangent as to figure it out later, but if he picks somebody else and there's no we did what we could. He just picked someone else. Like you have to be able to pivot and build a reasonable roster with the money you were going to pay that guy.
Able to convince the fan base that they actually tried, like the Yamamoto deal. I understand not wanting to give an unproven player who's never thrown a major league pitch more money than Garrett Cole. I think that's a fair take for the Yankees to have. I think $300 million was a lot more than anybody thought Yamamoto was going to get. And the fact that he eclipsed that with the Dodgers at 326.
Yeah.
I think that's a totally fair. I think the Yankees, I don't think anybody should complain about how they did that. Yamamoto clearly wanted the Dodgers and the Yankees played fair. The Yankees gave him a more than fair offer for what he was.
I mean, we'll hear what the offer was. We'll know if he leaves what the Yankees offered and what he got.
What's the lowest number you can think of for the Yankees to offer that you'd be okay with him leaving?
I mean, it really depends on the years. I think that's more where the Yankees could potentially lose him. Not AAB, but how comfortable.
Years?
Would I? Yeah. I'll do 20. But I also think, though, how good of a hitter he is. Like, you have to understand there's value in him all the way up until he calls it a quits. Like, every at-bat he takes is going to be competitive for the rest of his career. And that's just it. You're not signing this guy because of the fielder that he is. Although Juan Soto, Gold Glove finalist, did make that cut.
The other part of that, too, Dylan, is if you sign him to a 15-year deal, you're signing him for years 1 through 8. Like the back 7 years you'll just deal with.
Yeah.
You're hoping to win 2 to 3 titles in those first 8 years, though, if you're going to give him that much money. But, you're giving him those years to bring him in now. You're accepting the fact, though, that those last 5 to 7 years in a 15-year contract are just not going to be that good.
Yeah, I mean, I'm willing to accept it. I think the Yankees should be willing to accept it.
Last question as we wrap this up. When does Soto sign? John, let's start with you.
I think it's gonna be. I think it's gonna be later. I think you're gonna see like kind of probably not even until maybe like winter
Give me
meetings
a
around
give,
there.
give me a date.
A date. A date. I don't know. I'm tired.
Give me a month.
A month. I'll say January. I can't give you an exact date.
Early or late.
I'm gonna say early January.
All right, Ben.
I think he's going to sign a bit earlier just because I think there's going to be a lot of urgency with these teams trying to get him in and, having to pivot. I think if Soto takes too long, you're going to end up seeing guys pivot to a Santander, to a Bregman, to an Adames, trying to get just a different big bat into their lineup and work their way in because, there are some teams who will have to do a bit of finagling to get Soto into their lineup. He's not someone you could plug into multiple spots. He's playing one spot and that's it. I think that ultimately Soto will sign in December. We're going to get him just after those winter meetings, I believe. And then the number is going to be 15 for 525, just around 35 a year.
15 for how much?
525.
Wow. Dylan?
I think he signs December 19th. Oh, I picked that day because that is the Thursday before the week before Christmas. Get the weekend, go travel, go be with family, have your contract sorted out. I feel like that is the luxury of being the guy who runs free agency. You get to say, hey, this is when I want to decide by. I want to go into the holidays and I want to be, relaxing. I think the number's bigger though. I think we're looking at 14 for 600.
All right. I'm also of the minds of he signs winter meetings. I'm leaning around 12, 11. Not the last day of the winter meetings, but the second to last day to create some buzz. And I'm thinking the number is 13 for 624.
So you guys are really, really bidding higher than me here.
Well,
I mean, if this is the way it works, perfect.
See, but here's the thing, and I think yes, Soto with his age makes it a different situation. Is he like Ohtani's contract is unreal, but is he really that much higher value than a Bryce Harper to Philadelphia or
Yes.
what Mike Trout in his prime was supposed to be for the Angels? Because I mean, you guys are giving him $200 million more than what the highest contract in baseball ever was before Ohtani.
He's 26.
I think
contracts are getting more
He's not even in
expensive
his
every
prime
year.
yet.
I think one, obviously, just general inflation there. But two, for the Yankees, I think
inflation only gets to a point when you're talking.
No. I know. I
$1
said, but some of it is that obviously. I think Juan Soto would break the record if we were just at an even playing field because of his age.
Juan
and because
Soto
of the
signs for $600 million. We're never seeing another qualifying offer sent out again. These are going to be close to $30 million soon if this keeps up.
Yeah, but I also think you brought up earlier, and I'll just quickly make the point on it because I know we're going a little long here. Will the Yankees be willing to pay him more than Judge? One guy produced this postseason, and the other one didn't. And I think
guy's your captain, though. Aaron Judge had been brought
the
up.
Captain,
but it's a different situation when you trade for a guy and then he comes in and plays one season with you versus a guy who's been brought up. He set crazy records. He had
am I wrong, or did A-Rod make more than Jeter?
An insane season that Judge had before he signed that contract. Judge had as good of a season as you could have.
Yeah, but Judge is also 5 years older.
Yes, but still, but from the Yankees standpoint, those are things that they're going to still try to use when they're negotiating.
Yeah, I'm sure the negotiation will be what it is, but at the end of the day, they were competing against the Giants for Judge, Yes, but Judge wanted to be a Yankee.
I was going to say they
Ohtani
were able
wants
to
a
get
paycheck,
Judge for
or no, Ohtani.
significantly
Soto
less
wants the
than the Giants.
paycheck. Yeah, but Soto wants the check. Judge wanted to be the Yankee captain. Soto wants the bank.
See, but that fits with exactly what the Yankees typically try to go for, and that's a guy like Judge. Soto's going for the bag. He wants the bag. They have a limit.
Yes, this
and
is
I'm
my
curious
concern.
to see-
This is
I'm-
my big concern with this team. Absolutely. Like,
But also,
I'm not
Cal
saying you're
called
wrong.
Judge and said, "What's the number? What's it going to take?" And Judge told him the number it was going to take. So if Judge told him 10 for 400, Cal would have said okay. Judge told him the number of the deal.
But I'm curious from the Yankee standpoint what their limit is, how high they'll go is. I think that the Mets will be willing to go higher because Steve Cohen doesn't have that precedent set already. I think the Yankees are established as being the world-class organization. They could go another 10 years without winning a World Series, but they keep having over 500 seasons and keep doing what they're doing. They're still regarded as a world-class, best-run, sentient organization, essentially. So, they have a certain level of pride when it comes to dishing out these deals. I'm not saying that, they're not going to give Soto what he wants. I'm just curious as to what their limit is because I feel like it is a possibility that it does get too high, not necessarily for them to pay, but for them to feel okay with giving to somebody.
I mean, the contract I laid out of 14 for 600 is 42 annually. That's not, staggeringly higher than what Judge got. I believe Judge is in the high 30s.
Yeah, but it's for twice as long.
Well, he's 5 years younger.
No, but look, and I just gave you 15 for 35 a year, and that's what I feel like is what the market for Soto is going to be, because ultimately the Mets and Yankees are going to know that they're just bidding against each other.
Yeah, like I said, I think Scott Boras is on a bit of a revenge tour this offseason.
Oh yeah, and he's going to hold a bunch of teams over a barrel with this Soto deal.
Do you think this is going to be
This is
like
his
the
last big
Giants
player.
thing in football when they were like sitting around saying like, "Can we live with like Barkley going somewhere?" And don't give him the money, and then he goes to just like I'm just like, do you think
you
the
know,
Yankees are
It's
gonna-
different because the
Barkley.
Giants had no intention of paying Saquon at that point because the Giants had just gone through this whole situation with Saquon the year before.
I'll
They still
also
made the
say
right
this.
decision.
Hal Steinbrenner will go over Brian Cashman's head and just give Soto the contract himself if he was that uncomfortable with it.
Which is what he did with Judge.
Exactly.
But that's going to do it for us. We'll kind of revisit next week. We'll know, which players took the qualifying offer. This time last year, we saw some players sign. I believe Wheeler signed with the Phillies, right? This time last year, like the first week of free agency, he just signed a long-term
Yeah,
deal
he got
there.
his extension.
Yeah. So we'll have an idea more. We'll talk more in depth about some of the lesser free agents. Just not really say lesser, but
Like
outside
Corey,
the
you didn't
top
mention
10.
your guy getting signed.
What do you mean getting signed?
Well, Garrett Cole officially, the Yankees reworked his deal, didn't they?
No, they didn't rework anything. He just rescinded
He
the opt-out.
opted. He opted out,
rescinded the
and then they
opt-out.
said,
Yeah, but
"Okay," and then he
Well, I
opted
mean,
in.
Yeah, but
It
they
was
didn't
like- it
have
was like a
to,
nothing-
they didn't have
nothing
to give him
changed.
the 5th year to keep him.
Yeah,
No, they just nothing changed.
Yankees keep Cole. Coltrane's rolling.
Yeah, I mean, basically the Yankees and Cole are in no different position than they were in a month ago.
Well, they're in a different position than they were yesterday. Let's put it that way.
But yeah, so the Yankees told Cole, we're not going to pick up that 5th-year option. We don't feel comfortable with it. And Cole said, okay, I want to be a Yankee. I take it back.
Yeah, hopefully Soto has that same energy.
But that's going to do it for us. We'll get more into the other ones. We'll talk about what each team and their free agency plan should be. Do a little Hall of Fame talk as that approaches too. That's my favorite time of year. But that'll do it here for us. Corey, Jason, Dylan, Mel, Ben Mandel, John Pauline signing off.